So Doreen, thank you so much for meeting with us today and connecting with us with Skype. It is such an honor for me to have this opportunity. I'd like to begin and just talk a little bit about how you yourself became aware of Unity and involved with Unity.
Okay. Well, it was through my husband, and his mother took Daily Word, and David had been ill as a child with rheumatic fever, and she'd been told to take him to the seaside to recuperate, which she did, and she sat on a form. She was a very talkative person, and she loved meeting people, and she sat on a form, and the lady who was sitting near her asked her, they started talking, and told her about David's condition. And she said, well, I take this little book, Daily Word, and if you like, I will put his name on my prayer list, which she did, and they kept in touch until she died, actually. And David she was on for 12 months, and he went back to the specialist, and he'd made a complete recovery.
Oh my goodness.
And so that was, she introduced us. When we were married, she gave us Daily Word as a little gift, and we took it ever since then. And so that's how my first introduction to it, because I'd been a strong Methodist before that, and involved in all the activities of the Methodist Church and so on. So it was a step sideways, really. It was David's interest. And then, of course, he got very interested in the spiritual side of it. And he eventually started taking the Lessons in Truth course. Mm-hmm. And from that, Jim Freeman was in charge of the ministerial training course then. And one day David got a letter which said that if he was interested, he would be accepted for the ministerial training course. And that was without an interview. So he hadn't thought about that, but it was something that he felt he wanted to do. So he applied, and we eventually came over to Unity Village. Me to work in Silent Unity in the letter writers, and David to go into the training program.
That certainly was a divine appointment, wasn't it? That was God calling.
Yes, it was. It definitely was, because I didn't know too much about Unity. I don't think David did, really, not in detail, but he felt absolutely sure that it was right for him. And we had been married about 3 years, I think, then, 3 or 4 years. So we came over and I worked, as I say, in Silent Unity, and he went to the classes. Yeah, we were there for just over 2 years.
Well, as you know, David holds a very special place in my heart, as you do. When I came into International Services Department, the two of you were the first international guests that we had here at the village, and very quickly were endeared to me. And as I shared with you in the past, many, many sweet memories of your times when you would come to the village to visit, and many lessons learned, and when I think of David, my heart always smiles. Such a precious, precious soul. So, would you speak a little bit about your capacity, the different areas that you've served in Unity?
Right. Well, of course, my training, I worked for 2 years in Silent Unity in the letter writing. So that was a very good training for me. I'd been before that in the medical field. So, you're very precise in that and working with detailed stuff. So I really it was a change, but I loved the Silent Unity work and reading the letters that came in. And of course, you progress in silent unity room from 1 up to, I don't know what, 10 or whatever it was. And I did that. I never got to write letters from scratch because we left before then. But when we came back here, I went into, they had a small silent unity movement here. We came back, Bob Sicking was in charge then.
Mm-hmm.
And we came back and went to Unity House and stayed there. They really didn't know what else to do with us. I mean, that sounds silly, but they hadn't, what I feel, prepared for David to come back. And so eventually we went to Unity House, and that's where our son was born, at Unity House. And then after that, they said, would we go up to Manchester? Well, we came from that area, so it was like going home, and our families were up there, so we did. And David started a centre up in Manchester, and that was fun from scratch. Excuse me. And so we were there for, I think it was about 4 years. And he took Sunday services, and he had classes in this building, very old building near the cathedral. And he went out. He had started small groups in the north of England. And so every evening he would visit one of these small groups. He went on a monthly, he took a month, and every night during the weeknights he would be visiting a group somewhere or other. So he built up quite a, you might say, a following in a way. And they were all in the north of England, in Yorkshire and in Lancashire. But it was quite a, I was left at home with the babies. But that was fine. And he just loved it. And so that went on for, for a few years. Then Bob Sicking was invited to go back to the States. And that meant that there was nobody left to take the work forward in this country, because we'd only got David as a minister and Bob. And so they asked David if he would take it over. So we had to move from the north of England down to London, where Bob had bought the new premises, Unity House, which we did. And so we, just at that time, the children decided they would have measles. So he came down and I stayed up there till they got over that. And then we were together again about April, just before Easter. And Easter he was off somewhere doing some talks or meetings or a retreat or something. And I had Unity House to myself. And it was a 9-acre area with a beautiful old house. It was a place where Edgar Wallace used to live, and absolutely lovely, lots of rooms. But that's Easter Sunday, on my own, with just two little babies. I walked around and I thought, this is so wrong, that I am here with all this land, and even with a family. It was just not right. It did not feel right. So when David came back, we put our heads together and said, well, we need to build it up in some way or another. That's when he started developing, the groups, the study groups, more down in the south as well.
Mm-hmm. So when you say Unity House, Doreen, can you give us any history as to how Unity House acquired that name? Why it was called Unity House?
Well, it was Bob Sicking who gave it the name. It was a Unity headquarters. Yes. in this country, and so to make it realistic to people, they couldn't call it Gilbey's. The whiskey people owned it after the writer, and so they couldn't call it that. They couldn't give it a whiskey name, so he called it Unity House, and it was a good name because everybody loved it. And even now, that carried on until they left Maidenhead. The premises were still called Unity House, but it was a name that Bob thought up, and it was a good one. People could relate to it.
Yes, I agree. It was a very warm and inviting.
Yes, it was.
It wasn't. There was no barrier with that. It was just you're welcome here. You're welcome.
That's right. Yes.
You speak of Bob Sicking. Can you, looking back, can you tell us about the Unity history, even prior to Bob and then including Bob?
I don't know whether you know Anna May Kilhurst. She came over here. Her husband was transferred over here, and she took a job. He took a job here, and she had been attending a Unity group over there. She was very interested in metaphysics. There's a tremendous interest in those days in metaphysics, both in the States and certainly over here. And she came over here and she started a meeting. Now, what did she call it? It wasn't called Unity. It was called New Thought. New Thought groups. Yes, that's. And it was in London, and they expanded and grew, and eventually there must have been about five groups that would meet in different parts of London. And it was due to Anna May Colhurst, really. She was the lady who wrote God is my help in every need,
mm-hmm. Yes.
Which we sing, the kids sing it, and it used to be in Wee Wisdom regularly.
Yes.
And then I don't know whether they went back to America. They probably did, but there's no record of that at all. But she was a lecturer and a teacher from the USA, and she'd attended New Thought groups in the USA. In the Unity magazine at that time, which they reproduced with a hardback cover. I don't know if you've seen some of the old copies.
I have.
Yes. I've got about 8 or 9 here. Ruth Hacking had a whole load of them. But they would put a whole year in one edition. I don't know whether you realise that, but they're fascinating reading. And in there, that's where they must have asked Charles to advertise these groups, metaphysical groups, and he did. And so eventually there were groups in London and Bournemouth and in Scotland, and they were all advertised in the Unity publication. And so people must have seen them and gone along to the groups. The one in London was run by a book company called Fowler's, L.H. Fowler's, and it was a big book company, and they ran this metaphysical group, and they sold Unity literature, and I don't know what literature they had, but it must have been some, I don't know, some of the literature that available at that time. And so that's how it really began to grow as Unity. But metaphysics had been very active in this country earlier than that, in the late 1800s. And so it was really, seeds had been sown. And so it was just a great time.